All right, welcome back to the Junto. I'm Noah Sawyer, and this is episode 46. And yeah, still just doing one episode a week for the time being. And to start off, I haven't read the encyclical from the Pope yet, but as I mentioned, a lot of people were asking me if I read it. And now, after looking just briefly at it, I see why, because it is really inspiringly relevant to this project, like this live stream project. So I just wanted to read a couple paragraphs from it to warm up. And yeah, I'll read just a few paragraphs here. So, while Leo XIII spoke in his time of new things, today we cannot limit ourselves simply to repeating his insightful teachings. Instead, we must ask God for the wisdom to interpret the great trends of our time, particularly technological advances. In recent years, it has become increasingly evident how rapidly and profoundly digitalization, artificial intelligence, and robotics are transforming our world. Technology should not be considered in itself as a force antagonistic to humanity. On the contrary, it has formed part of our history since the beginning as a profoundly human reality linked to the autonomy and freedom of man. Over the centuries, technological development has significantly improved the living conditions of humanity. At the same time, each phase of progress has also revealed the ambiguity of tools that can cause harm when not oriented toward the good. Today, however, we find ourselves facing a new situation. The power and prevalence of emerging technologies are interwoven into the fabric of daily life, shaping decision-making processes and deeply affecting the collective imagination. Never has humanity had such power over itself. New technologies open up a horizon extending in directions that are imaginable but not yet fully predictable. This complicates the assessment of their potential impact and the long-term effects they may have on both the dignity of individuals and the common good. It now falls to us to face the challenges of our time with clarity of thought and responsibility. It is necessary to establish adequate regulatory tools capable of upholding justice and curbing the distorting effects of technological power. Nevertheless, the issue is not limited to regulation. As Pope Francis warned, we must realistically ask ourselves who holds this power today and how they use it. Quote, "It must also be recognized that nuclear energy, biotechnology, information technology, knowledge of our own DNA, and many other abilities which we have acquired have given those with the knowledge and especially the economic resources to use them an impressive dominance over the whole of humanity and the entire world. In the past, it was largely up to the state to guide and direct innovation. Today, however, the main drivers of development are private, often transnational parties that are endowed with resources and the capacity to intervene that surpass those of many governments. Technological power thus takes on an unprecedented, predominantly private aspect, which makes it even more challenging to discern, govern, and direct such power toward the common good. For this reason, it is necessary to begin a shared discernment process for identifying the spiritual and cultural roots of ongoing transformations. If we focus only on contingencies, we risk letting the succession of emergencies dictate the direction of our path. We are living through a rapid phase of transition, a change of era, in which, while some are vying for the future of new technologies and others dedicate themselves to reflecting on the matter, most people are watching and waiting, observing from afar and merely hoping for the best. For this very reason, crucial questions impose themselves on our conscience and can no longer be avoided. Where are we going? Toward what goal do we wish to orient ourselves? What direction should we choose as a people and as a human community? So much in there is related to what I'm trying to do with the show, like this emphasis on creating a mutual, culturally accepted or easy to articulate clarity about how profoundly technology affects us differently now. Like, never has humanity had such power over itself. Never have technological means been able to influence the masses in this way. And then that emphasis, as Pope Francis says, on how now it's not so much about state actors entirely, it's just people and transnational coordinations of people who have the economic power to utilize these means to their own ends. And the emphasis on the importance of a shared discernment process in this moment. So once you have that clarity, and as you work to develop that clarity about what is going on in the world and how it is affecting us as people, how are we going to change it, or what would we even want to change? There's this analytic problem that follows about it's an analytic and strategic problem where it's like, how do we actually move into the future? And he emphasizes that most people are watching and waiting, observing from afar and merely hoping for the best. And many people, I don't know if everyone even is hoping for the best. There's a lot of apathy and just total shroud of darkness ignorance that pervades our culture. So I'm really looking forward to reading this. I think I'm going to read it before next weekend. Probably I'll read it next week because I'm kind of busy recording some music this weekend. And yes, hello David in the chat. Good evening. And yeah, I don't know, so personal update. Well, first of all, like still on that note, I really think this is an extremely interesting moment for the church. And I think with lots of young people with new perspectives and novel forms of intelligence approaching the theology of the church and applying it to our present moment, I don't know. I've had so many people ask me about this who are not Christian or Catholic, and I think the fact that it appears, based just off the little bit of the introduction that I've glanced at, that he really is bringing the truth to bear on the current circumstances, and that is just necessarily going to speak to a large number of people, especially young people who are reluctant to adapt to how awful their lot is at this point. Older people and financially stable people and very consumer-minded or materialistic people, I don't think necessarily have any interest in these kinds of questions. But there's now a type of underclass amongst Gen Z and younger millennials that I'm curious to see how it interacts with the truth of Christianity, and especially if this is what the Pope is going to focus on in his time as the Pope. So I don't know, it bodes well, and I'm excited about it. And personally, like, I started this project not as a Christian, and just as someone who had a pretty wide network of friends and felt like I at the very least had friends around the country and the world who were going to tune into this and keep up with me more than I'd be able to just keep up with them through all our isolated phone calls to each other. And so I had that perspective for developing and sharing these types of ideas about this type of urgent problem, like just within my own social network. But what I've found since joining the Catholic Church is how much it is a pre-built network and how connected everybody is. It's not like everyone's connected to everybody in the social sense, but there's a, it really, the ball is rolling so fast just with my connections in the Catholic community, and that feels good because it mixes with this project of the Junto. And it makes me think, when I try to imagine the future of the church in this moment, like all different eras call for different forms of spiritualities within Catholicism, and that's what a lot of the saints were called to develop, and that's why they're remembered so that's why they stick out so much in their era, is they develop this form of spirituality that speaks to a lot of people at the time and in all future eras. And that likewise is our time is no different, and it calls for people to, like, saints will rise in our era, and I'm very excited about that and the new spiritualities that will follow. And something I think about with that concept relates to this concept of the Junto, because the Junto idea is essentially that I think it's important for people to be getting together in person or digitally. However, I think it's important to get together in person and be discussing deep questions and be sharing information that is not informational, like not just exchanges of, did you read this? I thought it, like opinionated sort of information, which is what a lot of intellectualism in America is like at this point. I think people need to get together and talk about the deepest roots of their belief systems and come to try to understand their worldview and how their worldview is developed, what their psyche is, how it is affected by the current mind war technological state that we live in. So, yeah, I don't know. So I think that, so how that relates to how I see new spiritualities in the church is sort of like imagining a new role for lay communities in the, say in America or something, where like, because I'm kind of thinking of this in terms of like the Great Awakenings, but those were really like not great events actually in America, because it was a lot of just sus religious stuff going on. But however, if there's a Catholic Great Awakening that's happening in America right now, I think it bodes well and integrates with that concept of the Junto, where you are talking about questions of God, you are talking about questions of evil and of righteousness and of life after death and of the efficacy of prayer and what to pray for, or you're praying together in these scenarios. Like there's, yeah, so I that's my, that's, if nothing else, that's what I would like to help develop. And I hope that it develops regardless of me, but that is something that I see as something I would like to push for as I'm now getting more and more into church life and theology. So anyway, I guess I'm just gonna give a little bit of an update on what I have thought about. I forget what I titled this, something like Relinquishing Control. And that's because I was fasting. I started fasting Saturday morning, or technically the last time I ate for this fast, which is now over, was Friday night. And then I went to bed, and I wasn't planning to fast, but I just fell into one. And for background, I have something of an anxiety disorder, like a CPTSD, childhood deep dissociative anxiety problem that has plagued me for my entire life. It was the root of my depression. I've talked about how I was severely depressed and suicidal in my 20s, and a lot of that had to do with how I knew something was wrong with my brain, but it seemed inherent and it seemed unfixable, and that made me very depressed because it made me feel separate from other people. It made me feel retarded, basically. And I was like, I don't know why this happened, and I don't know if it's biological or if it is circumstantial or if it was traumatic. I couldn't remember any origin of trauma, so there was no, like, at least like nothing stuck out to me. So anyway, so I have overcome the depression, and I've overcome a lot of the anxiety, but basically I still have like a pretty deep set for like habit apparatus. Like I have a lot of different habits related to how my being deals with socialization in different contexts, or being social in different contexts. And you know, as with most of us, certain family situations are what really spikes that. So I was in a moment of being highly spiked in this regard, just totally, it was coming to weigh on me, like its hand was heavy on me. And so I was basically thinking about taking psilocybin mushrooms. And because I just desperately wanted some form of release, and psilocybin has been studied to release or like help with depression and anxiety and trauma and all of this stuff. So I was curious about if that might help me in this scenario. And that but I was on the fence with it because, in a way, I sort of, in my Catholicism, I was thinking I would never need to use drugs again in that way. And so, was coming up against this, I was like sort of torn. And I started to think of it, well, this is essentially a medical condition or a biological medical condition, and that's a biological medicine. It's from the earth. It is, it is studied as effective for treatment for these things. So there was part of me thinking that way, and there was part of me thinking that I perhaps need to I pray the pain away or something like that. Like I don't remember exactly how I was thinking of it, but basically I was wondering if there was a way to combat this feeling with religion. And so I mean, long story short, that is what wound up happening basically by accident. And so I sort of, I woke up Saturday and I didn't eat at the regular time, and I was like, let's just fast. Like, I'm thinking about taking a substance anyway. I might as well try fasting first and reflect and, fast from food, but also fast from the internet, fast from distracting myself. Like, when you're fasting, if you go hang out with people, the time passes a lot faster, but I didn't want to let the time pass too fast. I wanted to face whatever was going to unearth itself in my consciousness. And so I don't normally, I think I went like 48 or 50 hours without eating food, which is maybe the longest I've ever gone without eating any food. Because even when I was depressed and would like not be eating really, I feel like I'd probably have a snack in a 48-hour period at the least. That is very hot. So anyway, I wound up in this fast, and before taking the mushrooms, I ultimately wanted to talk to a priest about it to get his perspective. And so ultimately I would do that the following day. But the primary, I'm just going to go through the few major events of this fast. And the first one was I went and I hung out with my mom. And I wasn't planning on, I wasn't totally locked into the fast. I was just thinking maybe I'll just do it, till tonight, and I'll eat something tonight. I don't know. But ultimately, in talking to my mom, we're very close, and we're very real with each other about everything, psychologically and spiritually, and just all sorts of real life subjects. And so it was a good conversation, and we wound up talking about my motivations for the fast, or my uncertainty about the whole thing. And over the course of this conversation, I'd started to get hungry by this point, and it started to change my perception, and I started to feel a little bit of a draw on my body in a way, and it changed my perceptive consciousness. I don't know I guess just my perception. Like, it felt like I had a slightly different, we were sitting out by the trees, and you can just, the colors change a little bit. Like, you just, like when you stay up all night or something like that, I notice your perception changes. It's an altered state of mind. So while having this deep conversation about motivations and hopes and things like that, and being struck by the fast, it was deeply suggested to me that this was going to help, and I didn't need some sort of psychedelic intervention. But I still wasn't sold on it. And the following day, I won't get into this whole confession really, because there was, I don't know. It was interesting. It like wound up relating to, we were talking about demons and things, but it feels kind of like maybe private, not in a way that it has to do with like personal information even, but it was like just, it was a private conversation. But ultimately and we didn't even get into details because we got off topic into something else that was interesting, but he pretty much denounced mind altering substances. But through the course of the rest of this conversation there, I was really set on giving my all to this fast, at least for the rest of the day or however long I could take it. And so I wound up, ultimately, this all evolved into a realization about what I am capable of and why and how. And so I was tempted to take the drug because I thought the drug would cure my ailment. However, where this wound up lying is this distinction that I'm still having trouble describing to people because it is new to me and it's just something that was broken through and that I'm just adjusting to still. But it relates to trust in God, it relates to the ego and the consciousness, and it relates to control, and it relates to I guess I could break it into just, those three, that little trinity of things there. So I wound up praying in a lot of my time when, well, I shouldn't even say a lot of my time. It wasn't most of my time. I guess it was a lot, but it's hard to pray for extended periods of time for me still. And so I reached an interesting moment because I was seeking guidance with respect to what to do, like basically with respect to my anxiety. Like there are things I really concretely want to heal from. Like it affects the interiority of my mind, which affects my creativity, because if I can't think in a full, slow, continuous space in my mind, then I'm thinking in a fractured and rapid and disjoint form of mind, and that affects the creativity because you can't create clearly. It damages the clarity in your mind. And so I think of all these things, and I've thought of these things for a long time this way, but more in the perspective of Taoism with respect to a single God, which was like I wanted to walk the Tao. I wanted to walk that path. I wanted to be on that path. I wanted to do what God wanted of me. That's been my perspective for a long time. And it's just been a journey of trying to figure out, okay, well, how do you do that? And that ties into all of this because that's the kind of breakthrough that I've had in a moment over the weekend. And I'm really just doing this off the dome here. I haven't tried to write it down or anything, but basically, you have this ego in your mind that speaks, and in my diary and stuff, if I'm analyzing something related to this, I'll call it the I in quotation marks. It's the I that speaks I. It says I. So when I say that, that's the I saying that. And however, I understand that my selfhood is something much deeper just than this ego that orients my linguistic consciousness and the stream of consciousness that speaks for me and thinks in speech for me. So, you wind up and you're speaking in prayer. It's done through language a lot of the time. And so I am sort of stuck in this situation where there's this I within me, which is trying to decide what to do. And in reality, it is never going to know what to do. This is the start of the breakthrough, basically. It's in a way, it feels like a sort of ego death, and it is related to a sort of insignificance that comes with ego death, along with a profound significance of creation and of God. So you're kind of scrambling around deciding what to do, or even speaking in prayer and admitting that you don't know what to do. And I reached this psalm-like moment. If you've read many of the Psalms, there are lots of points where David or another author is crying out for help, like is just, I don't know. And it's interesting because I've had so many emotional points in my life and also a lot of really low points in my life. And this didn't feel like either of those. It felt almost more fundamentally existential than any of those. And yet it didn't, like, it didn't flip my world upside down, but there was something, so it was so fundamental that it was almost like you can only feel the reverberations of it because it is happening at such a deep point, maybe. And so in that point, it's just like I'm scrambling, trying to almost decide what to ask help for. And then I realize that I don't know what to ask for help for, and I need help even knowing what to ask. And there's this just deep humility that comes with, like, I just don't even know what to do. Please help me with, like, just show me what to do. And I don't know how to convey what really happened in this whole experience, but there was a shift in that, where in that personal humility that grew, and in that sort of disintegration of the quote I unquote, there was a deep trust in God that was allowed to take root for a moment. And it was allowed to realize that God created all of this and is the means through which all of this exists, and is the means through which I exist. And he knows me far better than I know myself. And he knows what I'm going to go through, certainly far better than I do. And in this whole shift, there was I guess I don't know what to say. It was a shift. And it made me realize how that is something that I need to develop in terms of my relationship with God. So I need to, through my relationship with him, develop this deeper and deeper sense of trust and deeper sense of humility in my own life, in my entire lived experience, so that I can do whatever it is that God wants me to do. And that's like what I mentioned a minute ago. That would be like walking in the way of the Tao. That would be, because I have ideas about what I'm supposed to do with my life. And I think a lot of those probably are going to come into play because they involve unique things about me. And God knows those unique things about me, and I would be surprised if he didn't use them for something. However, I don't need control of deciding where it's actually going to go and how it's actually going to work and what the goals are actually going to be in the end. I just need to be able to, in every moment, relinquish my will to God so that I might do the best thing for me and for all of creation, which is to just be in harmony with creation and not in harmony with the sins of the world and the collective horror culture that we are all entrapped within. Quite the opposite. I want to be in harmony with creation in a way that sets fire to the prison on top of creation. And so, yeah, I don't know. Basically had a pretty good weekend. Yeah, and there were lots of other random little things in there because I've been thinking about fasting, and I've always had a problem with gaining weight. So I eat a decent amount, which was not always the case in my life. Like sometimes for a while I just literally wasn't eating enough so I wouldn't gain weight. But now, like, I eat plenty and I still can't gain weight. And I feel like that's related to my anxiety disorder and my metabolism and everything. And so I was curious about fasting, but I was like, do I really want to do that? Because I kind of have like maybe I'm already malnourished in a certain way because of stress or something like that. Like I started getting gray hair at like 18, just like a little bit, and it just has slowly grown. And I feel like it's stress related. And so I um there was a nice moment in there too, or in the early phase where part of that just relates to my appearance. Like I don't want to look emaciated, but there was this moment where I was just like, I don't care how I look. Like that just does not matter in the long run. So that was also a type of ego death in a way. It was a type of like, I don't need to, like ultimately, like I hope to get married, but that doesn't need to relate to this sort of like inner desire to look attractive, because like what if my future wife is walking down the street today or something like that. There was also that relinquishing of control there where I'm like, well, like my anxiety problem is a lot more important to resolve than the way that I look. Like I'm just going to look how I look. And so yeah, there were lots of little things like that buried within the experience as well. And I mean, it was a very pervasive shift, I guess you could say. And that was like that was maybe something that was clicking with me before that shift happened, but then afterwards it started to show itself in all sorts of things in my daily life, in certain ways that I would think, in certain ways that I would interact with people. And I'm curious to see how it works out in my whole rest of my life, I guess. And one more note there, I guess, is I had another interaction after all of this. So after I had started eating again, and it was weird because I was struck with a very profound sadness, almost despair, and, embarrassment, and just like it was a really weird way of feeling that was not brought on by it didn't seem to be brought on by any particular thing that happened socially. Just a whole confluence of circumstances, I guess. But really it was bizarre, and it was so striking for that to happen after such an intensely positive experience. But ultimately it resolved itself in what I would describe as sort of a beautiful way. And it demonstrated to me, it actually just, through that little hiccup happening, it gave me so much more confidence in what I had experienced, because I used what I experienced and that trust in God to get through it, even though I felt a strangely deep sense of despair that I usually do not like. I mean, I'm well aware of despair. I used to experience a lot of despair, but I hadn't in a while like that. So it was interesting. I guess it just felt like stress testing a joint you had just put together or something, like welding a joint and then you stress test it. I don't know. So yeah, I don't know. I'll see you guys not tomorrow, but next week. And pretty soon I guess I don't want to make any false promises, but I'm planning on getting pretty into this again soon. And I am looking into equipment so that I can just live stream like on the go, because I do not always want to come to the studio. It's the summer, and there's a lot of times where I'm out and about in the world, and I would like to do a show, but then I can't. So good night. So yeah, I'm gonna figure that out. So when I'm out, I can just like put a phone on a tripod or a camera on a tripod or something and be able to go live, because I was thinking for a minute about doing that for shooting videos, but I just like being live. It's a lot more natural to me. And so anyway, that's all that's going on. If you like it, or if you watch this far, like the video, leave a comment, subscribe, show your friends, whatever. Have a good night, everybody, and I'll see you next week.